I am a Democrat. I'm a very proud Democrat. I know this district well. I know the people. I know our problems. Congress is not working at all, and our current congressman is especially not working. I would be the better candidate because I am willing to work with other people. I'm willing to listen to all sides and see if we can find that one little germ of common goal and get things done. Knowing the general community, this district has rural, it has urban, it has suburban. It is a very diverse because it is, seriously gerrymandered. And I think that getting out to know the people there and working with them is vitally important. Our current congressman seems to help the few, not the many. I've looked at his legislation. He's written legislation that benefit car dealers like himself. He's written legislation that benefit those with the upper incomes in terms of tax legislation. He wants to privatize the VA. He wants to privatize Social Security. All these things that are very helpful for people, for a very certain tiny number of people, but not for the majority of us. I ran for state senate in 2006. That wasn't my first political experience, however. I opened a floral design school in 1990, and I found out that there was some legislation that was really onerous on small schools. So I worked with Representative Wilhelmina Delco, and it took us 2 sessions, and we also worked with TEA. We got a small, they called it the small school bill. We had a coalition of small schools like myself that didn't take federal funds. It's what made me realize that ordinary citizens can impact legislation, and that's what really got me fired up about politics, is that you can impact. All you have to do is have the passion to do it. I met my husband in Longhorn Band, and 15 short years later we married. We have our daughter Letty, who is now 14. She's a freshman at Dripping Springs High School, and family is just really important. We need somebody that understands what it's like to work in everyday life and to work with tighter budgets. And we just need someone who's going to get the job done. People know I get the job done. I'm Kathi Thomas, and I approve this message.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to We the People. Tonight, We the People meet Kathi Thomas, who is running in Texas' 25th district against a guy named Roger Williams, who looks like what Republicans used to look like before we got this new breed of Republicans. Seriously, it's like an old school fossil fuel, military industrial complex guy, card-carrying Republican. And we're really glad to have Kathi running against him in a very red state of Texas. Excited to hear how she's doing. And honestly, I hadn't listened to all of her opening video, but she's got way more experience than I was aware of. So I'm excited to talk to her about that as well. Kathi, thank you for joining us on We the People.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. That I'm honest, I hadn't heard that you ran or that in 2006 and you had your first experience. That's really cool. That's a great story to talk about, knowing the power of what it took and how long it took. Because you said it took 2 sessions, right?
Yeah, which means over a period of 4 years, because our session only meets every other time.
I think that's so important for us to hear, because we want things so fast, right? And government not
doesn't move fast in Texas at all. We visited every single legislator and talked to them.
Yes, it's a lot of work. We're going to get more into that about groundwork. First, let's bring in Laura Livengood, who is our comment moderator. Hi, Laura. Tell everybody the rules of engagement. You'll be taking questions from everybody in the audience tonight.
I will. Our live audience is really an important part of the show, and you get to ask actual questions of Kathi. I'm going to drop in her website to start with, so you can get the basics. But if you have something you want to ask, either tag me at Laura Livengood or write the word question all in caps. I won't pay attention to anything else because I can't really see it. So we'll take your questions a couple of times during the show, and I'll try and tie them in with what she's talking about and ask away. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Laura. Kathi, so let's just start with the basic stuff. So you've run before. You ran in 2016. I was looking at that. I didn't even see the 2006 effort. That's really cool. You're running against Roger Williams, who is really, really Republican. You're running as a Democrat, and you're definitely running on progressive values.
Yes.
Why? That seems really dangerous where you are.
Well, I'm running on progressive values because those are the values that I was raised with. I was raised in a family that had very strong faith, and when I look at what supports my faith, those values are what support my faith. That we do justice, and that we love mercy, and that we what we do the least of these is really important. And those are when you talk to people in Texas and they talk about their faith, then we have to be able to say, and here's what that means.
Right.
And so I think that's important to be able to do that here. I'm running because I heard Roger Williams speak in 2015, and I was so horrified by what he said.
Wow.
I came home and told my husband, if nobody runs against this man, I'm going to run. Because
Wow.
we cannot let him go unchallenged. He said that faith, family, and country were the most important things to him, and he started talking about things that didn't have anything to do with any faith I'd ever heard of. Didn't know what kind of country he thought we were, and it was very clear the only family he cared about was his own. So I ran against him.
Fantastic. Yeah, I saw that, and not bad. And we're going to talk about the results of that because, really, as far you're an economical candidate, we learned that you don't need millions of dollars to run. But I want to just stick on that for a moment. You opened up with faith, and I want to talk about that because that's a stickler for me, especially with what we see coming out of not just the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party. All right, if anybody in there that claims to be a Christian at this point, really lacking in those values. Right.
Yeah.
And I want to bring up, just to bring this home, everybody. I'm trying to find the image here. This is Roger Williams' vote record, just on a few things. You can see the ones he's on the Trump position with, or the green ones. What's interesting to note here are the October 12th vote, which is for disaster relief for Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And he voted no.
Fine Christian belief, isn't that?
Yeah.
What you do for the least of these, you do for me. He seems to forget that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable hypocrisy. So tell me, you've been walking the street. I mean, obviously, you've been doing this for a long time, walking the streets of your district, which is gerrymandered beyond belief.
Driving a lot of those streets.
That's crazy. How many miles? That's a lot of coverage you got to hit.
Oh, I can easily put 600 miles on my car on a weekend, just driving from one end of the district to the other.
And the government
Very
reimburses
easy.
you for all that mileage, right?
Oh, yeah, you bet. Checks in the mail.
Right. Do you see that, everybody? What did you say this looked like? You were cracking me up earlier.
Jalapeno.
Yes. Looks like a jalapeno. And if you guys notice, Austin is a part of this. I am because I'm a musician. Austin City Limits is something I used to watch. Eric Johnson. I'm a huge Eric Johnson fan. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Tell me about your district in terms of constituents. How do they feel about Roger Williams?
People either love him or they hate him. There is no in between with him. The interesting thing is, a lot of people don't even know him. I still have people say, "Oh, Lloyd Doggett's my congressman." I'm like, well, he was 12 years ago.
Wow.
Because 25 was the district that Lloyd had, but then they gerrymandered it to get rid of Lloyd, and of course he ran in 35 and won that one.
Oh my gosh.
So a lot of people still think Lloyd isn't, and frankly Lloyd still takes care of us because we get nothing from Roger. So if we need something, we can call Lloyd's office, and I'd like to help relieve Lloyd of some of that work burden and take that on and take 25 back.
So was Lloyd a halfway decent politician? If he takes care of
Lloyd was a good guy. He takes care of what you need taken care of. When we call him, he will take care of things for the district. So we appreciate that.
Okay, wow, that's unbelievable. So you have people in your district that don't even know who's representing them
Not a
at this
clue.
point. Are they just voting R? Is that what they're doing?
Yeah. But here's the interesting thing, because mainly I think because Houston voted so heavily Democratic last time, and they had, I think, a 13-page ballot. This last time in the legislature, they changed so there's no more straight party voting, because Houston went blue, and it just drove the Republicans nuts. So now you actually have to vote for each and every individual person. So there's no more straight ticket, which it's going to hurt the people down ballot, no doubt about it. There's going to be a lot of undervoting, because if people are in a hurry, they're probably not going to go through 13 pages.
Right.
But for people at the top of the ballot, we may get a little more split ticket voting, which might be kind of interesting.
That's great. And that should be excellent for you, I hope.
Hope so.
I hope that's because you're. Let's just look at that. Let's go to. Let me find a slide. Go find it right here. Your effort last time was pretty impressive, and the result. Yeah, everybody, this is what we're looking at here. This is from 2016, running against Roger Williams. Remember, Kathi Thomas running as Democrat without the fund. I mean, you weren't funded by the DCCC in this effort,
Oh,
right?
no.
Yeah, didn't think so.
No,
Yeah,
no, it was all grassroots. I'm a grassroots kind of gal.
yeah. Well, thank you. Because we probably, if you were funded by the DCCC, you wouldn't need to be on this program. So just leave it at that. Libertarian actually pulled 4 points. That's impressive as well. But I got to find this slide. In terms of cost, what did you raise for that campaign and to get 118,000 votes? What was your?
Gosh, about 40,000 somewhere in there.
Right, right. So it was. So what what I'm trying to find here, everybody, is that what it came down to. Here, how much did your vote cost? This is amazing.
Yeah.
When you talk about work, the effort that, where I'm going with this, it takes grassroots effort, as you were saying, to get these kind of results. Okay, here's the 2016 effort in District 25. Roger Williams spent $375,000 or $2.08 for each of the 180,000 votes he earned. Democrat Kathi Thomas spent more than $30,000, about 26 cents for each of the more than 116,000 votes she received. Libertarian Lauren Mark Snyderman received about 12,000 votes and spent no money. That's a very interesting. It's 26 cents for each vote, but my guess is that came at a high cost to you in terms of time and effort.
Well, I basically left my business 2 years ago and have been working full time. I have a very understanding husband who agrees with me that this is important, and it's important to not just our family's future, but all of the people in the district. And he supported me in not bringing any bacon home anymore.
Wow, that's awesome. I do understand that because I am not the breadwinner in this family. My wife is, and she supports my effort to do this. So I totally get how that works.
Great.
Right, for the revolution. I'm glad you brought that up in your business. I didn't realize that you had stopped doing that for 2016, but right?
Yeah.
Here's how this is from your business, and we're going to get into environment, which for me in Texas has got to be the most important issue in a number of ways. This is you run a floral business or ran a floral business, and you were focused. You had the greener wedding. You work with environmentally sensitive designs. So talk about that. Why that choice?
I grew up in a family that I think probably because my parents had grown up in the Depression, I was taught that you recycle things, you reuse things, you composted. My sisters and I used to argue about who had to take the compost out every night. It's just the way I was brought up. You
Nice.
don't waste. You just don't waste. And living out here in the hill country outside of Austin, it's beautiful, it is precious, it is fragile. And we do everything we can to live as lightly as possible. Obviously, we live outside of town, so we are driving a lot.
Right.
But we do try to make our trips not just one-purpose trips. My husband drives a Prius so that he's not using tons of gas on the way in and out.
Right.
We compost everything. We're 100% rainwater here at our home.
Really good.
Yeah, we do everything we can to be as conservation-based as possible. Um, Being concerned about the future for our child too. I know that if everyone does just a little bit, it does add up. And we want to have a world where our kids can actually still, do things like breathe and drink clean water and
Yeah.
grow food. And, if the temperature keeps getting hotter and hotter, they're saying within 100 years that it's quite possible our part of Texas could be desert.
Oh yeah.
And that's a little scary.
I would say sooner.
Actually, it's a lot scary.
It's way scary. I mean, and right now I was reading an article that Texas is dealing with horrendous, major parts of Texas are dealing with horrendous asthma issues, right? Because of the particulates in the air. You just had a massive hurricane that was increased by extreme climate change. It was a more extreme hurricane, did massive damage. You said you were dealing with flooding in your district in certain areas. How do your constituents feel about climate change and it affecting them and what we need to do for the environment?
It's interesting. I have a wonderful researcher, and he came up with the information that the people in this district are concerned about climate change. They may not think that it's going to affect them so much, but they do believe it's going to affect their children and their grandchildren, and they're concerned about that because people who have families care about what's happening to their kids and their grandkids. Whenever I look at what happened in Houston with 50 inches of rainfall,
Right.
and in Wimberley, the two massive floods they had, one brought the water about 40 feet high on the Blanco River
It's
and
insane.
wiped out entire homes. I mean, took one home off of its base, and they've still never found all the people that were in that home. Just incredible, incredible extreme weather. I was at a seminar where Dr. Catherine Hayhoe from Texas Tech, who's a wonderful climate change and actually an evangelical,
Oh,
interestingly enough,
yeah,
but she's
very.
a climate change scientist, and she says that the problem with calling it climate change is some people think, oh, it's going to snow in the summer and it's going to be hot in the winter. And so it's going to be extreme. The hurricanes are going to be more extreme. The droughts are going to be worse. The rains are going to be more. Everything's going to be more than it was. And that's what people need to understand. And we cannot continue to live this way. If we start looking at the water rising in Coral Gables, Florida, they're already raising the roads because they're already flooding.
Right.
And we could lose a whole lot of coastline in Texas. That's not part of Congressional District 25, but it is my state, and I do care about that.
Right. Right. Well, and part of that, I'm glad you brought up that, but part of the flooding that we saw, a couple of issues, was the lack of regulation around industry in Texas is so bad that you had, what was that one chemical plant with the stuff that was exploding and it was causing hazardous fumes, and that was because of deregulation, right?
Well, in Houston, many people in Houston are very proud that they don't have zoning. But when you don't have zoning, that's what happens is you get
Right.
industrial very close to homes. Had the same thing happen in West Texas, not West Texas, but West Texas a few years back, where a fertilizer plant exploded and killed a slew of people.
Right.
And it was very close in the town. It pretty much demolished the school, a whole lot of the town, because there's not the kind of regulations that there should be when they're hazardous materials that they shouldn't be able to be right there where there are people, and they should be regulated so that they're not allowed to have copious amounts of material. That particular one you're alluding to in the Houston area, they had to, so if I'm remembering this, they were supposed to have had electricity all the time because they had chemicals that if they got too hot would blow up. Well, that's probably going to happen sometimes, that you're not going to have electricity. So maybe they shouldn't have so much of that around.
Right.
Perhaps there should be some other way to manufacture.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're gonna talk more about that in relation to business and where you sit in a very business. I mean, Texas, we think of big business, and there's lots of industry, particularly in oil and gas. I want to go to Laura Livengood and find out if we have any questions from the audience. Then we'll come back and talk about how you would re-regulate. Laura, do we have anything?
Yeah, I do. Froze had a really good question about charter schools. I don't know
Ah,
how much of an issue that is for you, but the discrepancy in what charter schools versus public schools in their funding and their reporting, and also in the way that they do or don't document or certify their teachers. And wondered if you have an
mhm.
opinion about charter schools in general.
There's two different types of charter schools that are chartered. They're all considered actually public schools, interestingly enough.
Mhm.
Um, but there are some that are owned by private companies. There are some actual school districts that have charter schools within their school district. The ones that are privatized, where they're basically monetizing education, which concerns me greatly. By having teachers that aren't certified, there may be some areas, such as at our high school, for example, we have a mechanic that's come in. He's not a certified teacher, but he is a mechanic and he's teaching a VOTEC type class or CTE.
Hmm.
So that kind of thing makes sense. But whenever you've got elementary teachers and kindergarten teachers where there really are things a person should know. I've been a teacher. I was a band director.
No, wow.
And I've got to tell you, there's another little bit of news.
Yeah,
um,
that's awesome.
it is not an easy thing to do. So whenever you bring people in who really don't have a clue how to teach, they may have been very successful in business, may be wonderful people, but they may not be the most appropriate person to teach a class, because children do have different ways they learn, and if you don't understand all the different ways they learn, it can be a problem. The funding in Texas, there was just a bill passed to let the charter schools use money from our, it's what they call it, it's an endowment fund. Basically, it's from the land we have up in West Texas that all of our schools draw money from.
Oh, cool.
My concern with that is whenever we build schools in Texas, like my daughter goes to Dripping Springs High School. When we built that school, it was built with bond money. And if something happens, if the school went belly up for some strange reason, which, whatever, the school would still be owned by the school district. Whenever you're letting people who are privatized use public money to build their schools, I question who owns that building. Do the taxpayers own that money on that building? Because that's taxpayer money. And that's a big concern of mine with the privatizing them, is if taxpayer money is used, then taxpayers should own the building. If taxpayer money is used, then there needs to be transparency in their school boards. Right now, there's not with charter schools. With public schools, we elect the school board. We don't like them, we vote them out.
Right.
But with private schools, with charter schools, not so much.
All right, I'm going to tag on to that and then let Laura Livengood hit it, but I want to ask you this. So it sounds to me like what I'm understanding is that, for the most part, you're against privatized charter schools. However, you're okay with public charter schools.
I am, because in some schools, they will do some specialized types of things. I'm just remembering the University of Texas, for example, has a charter school in East Austin that does a terrific job. They have some of their student teachers are coming over from UT and teaching there, and they really do a wonderful job. They're not in it for the money. They're in it for education. So, and there are some charter schools, frankly, that do a great job. But they're not, whenever you look at the difference between public schools and charter schools, when you balance for the types of student populations you have, it turns out that charter schools really don't do any better job than public schools do, standard public schools. So I'm not quite sure why we keep saying, well, we need to do more charters, except that it is monetizing education and making somebody a profit.
It sounds
That's
like
what I have a problem with.
I totally agree, but it almost sounds like the same problem we see in the prison industry, where
Oh, absolutely.
so what happens with the private places is they're getting money, whereas our public schools get no money. So you look at them and go,
Exactly.
geez, they're doing a terrible job because those teachers are, they don't have any, what's going on, and we're causing the problem there, right? So if we funded our
Absolutely.
public schools, maybe we would, bring them up to charter school quality. I don't know.
Well, I would argue that our public schools, many of our public schools in our district are really top-notch schools.
Excellent.
I got tickled. Roger Williams was in Dripping Springs a couple of years. I think it was his last open town hall, by the way. And he started talking about how awful schools were. And we're sitting there going, you're in Dripping Springs.
Wow.
We're
Yeah.
one of the top schools in the state. What do you mean, crummy schools? So we do have a lot of really good schools in our districts. We've got some that struggle a little bit. Our rural schools struggle a little bit sometimes getting teachers because it's harder to get young teachers, especially, to move out into
Sure.
the hinterlands,
Yeah.
especially if they have a load of college debt.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I would like to see happen is to go back to a program they used to have where if you taught in rural schools or underserved urban schools, after I think it was 6 to 8 years, your college debt would be erased.
Yep.
Because right now, if you've got a young teacher going out there and they're looking at going to this rural school where they're not going to pay as high as some other schools, they're thinking, I'm never going to get my college debt paid off. How
Yep.
can I afford to get there?
Yep, I know it. I know it personal experience because I went to college late in life to get a degree, and I wanted to be a teacher until I found out that I wasn't going to be able to afford to be
Yeah.
one.
It's really terrible that we don't pay our teachers more, but we've got to come up with programs that are going to incentivize them going into teaching, make it easier for them to get their education so that they can afford to go into it. Because we need teachers. We need great teachers. I had wonderful teachers that literally changed my life.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Me too. We need to subsidize the right things, it seems.
Absolutely.
Ooh,
Laura
I've
Liven.
got a good question then.
Yes, excellent.
Because Metalhead wants to know about, he likes solar. And so,
Ah.
what do you think about solar subsidies?
I think we should move all the fossil fuel subsidies over to solar and wind. Texas is the single state largest producer of wind power in the nation. We need more transmission lines. Right now, up in Hamilton County, there's a big fight about having more windmills and wind turbines, and we've got some people saying, "Oh, it's going to kill the birds." These people have never cared about birds in their life.
Right now they do. Yeah.
But now that it's going to be wind turbines as opposed to drilling for oil and fracking and using more and more water, all of a
Right.
sudden they're concerned about that.
Right.
So absolutely, solar. I think the program that the vets have where they can train to be solar installers is great. I think we need to do everything we can to move to as much renewable energy as possible. I think we need to put more money in R&D for better battery storage. We could put money into our colleges for that. We could be training more and more veterans, retraining people from the oil fields to work in solar. It is the jobs of the future. It's the energy of the future, and we've got to quit looking at the past for jobs.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. Well said. Any other questions out there, Laura Livergood?
That's all I have got for the moment.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm all for it. It's pretty obvious that there's just a few individuals that are really pushing back at the top level against renewables. People like
Donald Trump.
And I mean, but even there's a lot, right? Even there's a lot of conservatives now that are seeing the writing on the wall in terms of investments, in terms of divestment from fossil fuels. Look, even if you just say, look, you're a capitalist, you want to make money, the money's gone this way, right?
Absolutely.
It's and we see it there. Look at what Tesla's doing with different places. But you're fighting Warren Buffett and his ownership of fossil fuel electricity throughout Texas and other places. And your opponent, Roger Williams, takes a lot of money from Warren Buffett, it seems.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
And he invests in oil and offshore drilling too. I will give Roger a little benefit. He used to be completely against renewables. He does have on his website now that he's for an all of the above, but we got to do oil is kind of what he says. All of the above, but we need to produce oil. And it's like, well, I think we can hold on to gas while we are moving completely to it. What we do need to do is do some R&D into thorium.
Yeah, I agree. Hey there.
Oh,
I think that would be
Jim to ask the thorium question. Oh, no. We have someone in chat who asks that of everybody.
Oh, that's great. Well, my husband is a big supporter of thorium, and he's who turned me on to it.
Nice.
There are times when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, and with the thorium, you can have the little stations in all the neighborhoods, and then when you've got flooding, you don't have an entire city going out. You've got it, it's area by area. If we have more solar, then after a storm where maybe power does go out, we've got solar bringing power back so much faster. I'm pleased to see that Musk is going down into Puerto Rico and doing some solar there, because trying to restring lines all over that place, the best thing they can do, I think, is put solar in there.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring up the thorium, and although I want to say one thing though on solar, with what Musk has done, and that is his battery technology is now to the point where we've overcome the squirrel curve, which was basically how do we deliver peak energy without having the renewable resources available. And so we do have the battery technology to do that. Right. Matter of fact, the city of Los Angeles is now on that battery backup.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, do you know that Georgetown, which is not in my district, but it is one of the reddest towns in Texas. It's in Williamson County, which is one of the reddest counties in Texas.
It's
Although
all
they are trending blue fast. They are 100% renewable energy
Really?
because their mayor said it makes economic sense.
Oh, so it's like you
Hello?
said, it's talking the right words, right? So it's not climate change, it's climate security. What is the right word there?
Well, extremes as far
Right,
as what we're doing, but when we're looking at moving towards renewables, it is security. It's making sure that we've got power all the time that we need it, that we have that we're not having to go fight wars. 6 wars I think we're in right now for oil elsewhere.
Right, right.
Even Saudi Arabia is moving towards solar. Hello.
Yes. Everybody is right. The oil companies recognize that they need to move towards renewables as an investment strategy. It's there. So, but All right, but what do you think about a lot of people? Because like Jerry Brown considers himself to be an environmentalist, yet he still hangs with the fracking, claims that we need
Mhm.
fracking to get us from one place to another.
Mhm.
How do you feel about that? Because I look at other countries and they're just like, nah, cutoffs here, and then we're going.
Mhm. Yeah.
What do you feel the reality is?
I think if we will move our subsidies to renewables, that we can make a cut. Fracking uses so much water, and they're using a new method of fracking now that uses even more water.
Oh
And
man.
water is a very precious resource in Texas. In Texas, we say that whiskey is for drinking and water's for fighting. And it kind of comes to that sometimes.
Wow, that's
Um,
scary though. Because I mean,
it is
let's talk about
scary.
well rights. I mean,
Oh gosh,
you're
yeah.
dealing with deregulation all around. You're dealing with
Mhm.
water that's ground tables that are being poisoned by
Mhm.
fracking and other things, and the loss of water. Right. So what's
Mhm.
going on with that in Texas?
Well, excuse me. Texas has this interesting rule of capture rule where it says that water that's under your ground is yours, as if it's a puddle underneath and it stops at the boundaries.
Right.
Well, they finally realized that that wasn't really working well. I
Oh,
think it was after maybe Clady Williams ran a river dry out around San Angelo. They finally figured out, oh, maybe we need to do something. So there are what they call groundwater conservation districts. My husband actually serves on the one that's out here.
wow.
And what their mission is to do is to preserve and conserve water so that everyone has access. And what that means is that if you are an individual, you still can pull as much water out of the ground as you want for your own home. Um, but if you are a business, you have to have a permit and you are limited to how much water you can pull. And if you go over that, you get charged. Different groundwater districts have different legislation. Some of them are really great legislation. Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer has great legislation. They're what we call a full Chapter 36. Hayes Trinity, not so much. It's one of the weakest. I think it is the weakest in the nation, in the state.
Hmm.
Sorry. So we really do need to have a strategy where all the groundwaters have the full Chapter 36 so that they can all be legislated the same. For example, year before last, sorry, a company called EP came into Wimberley, into Rollingwood, which is in my district, and they found a place that would lease them the land, and they were going to drill wells and pull out millions of gallons of water each day,
Wow.
regardless of the fact that all the homes around them were on wells, and it likely would have run their wells dry.
Right.
And what they had done, they found what's called a white zone. It was some land that was over the I think exactly how it worked. It was in the Edwards Aquifer zone, but they were going to go down to the Trinity. Therefore, it was not regulated because,
Weird.
yeah, it was a very strange thing. So the people in Wimberley had never wanted a groundwater district because they didn't want that government, taking their water. And whenever they realized it meant somebody else could come take their water, suddenly it was like, oh, please, please, please. So
Right.
they now are in the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer,
Hmm.
uh, Barton Springs Edwards Groundwater Conservation District. Sorry, long
That's a
names.
long name. You need that
Yes,
acronym.
it's a lot of minutia. I'm sorry, I'm probably boring everybody to tears,
No,
but it's something I'm really passionate about.
no. This is
So
look. Water is life, right? And
it
we can
is like,
tell.
and that was actually the motto we used when my husband ran for groundwater district. Water is life.
That's awesome. Your husband's
Because
on
it
board
is. I
too.
mean, you
That's great.
cannot live without water. We can live without fossil fuel.
Yes, we
We
can.
can't live without water.
That's right. That's right. And
So,
yeah. So it's
so
very.
now the people are protected. They are all very happy
Oh,
that
good.
they are protected, and we still live in dread of when the next person's going to find a white zone and come in and pull a well and hurt everybody else.
Well, this is until we replace the existing reps with people that want to put people over profit. This is what we have to do:
Hmm.
is be vigilant, right,
Right.
and make sure we get after them.
Yeah.
It's the democracy.
In Texas, there was a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically told the legislature, "This legislation is terrible. You need to fix this."
Hmm. Wow.
And the ledge has done zero about
Interesting.
it. So, I mean, they're basically saying this rule of capture is not working. It worked whenever there were, more cows than people, but there's a lot of people now.
Right.
A lot of people need water,
Right.
and homes are being built at just almost an alarming rate. and people putting in big yards and things like that. So people need to learn to live with the water that they have. That's why we rainwater harvest here. We know how much water we have. If we waste it, we're the ones that we hurt. We don't hurt our neighbors.
Yeah, that's yeah. So for where I live, I think, oh, I've got lots of water all the time, and I'm on well. But you're right, I got to worry about it too.
Uh,
You know.
it can go off. We had a time where when we were in drought, when people were losing their wells, and people said,
Wow.
I still remember this one lady said the night before Thanksgiving, she turned on her tap and nothing came out. The
That's
night before
frightening.
Thanksgiving, and her whole family coming over.
And
There was
it's
nothing they could do.
and it's so expensive to drill another well. So expensive.
Oh, heavens, yes. It's so much. It's actually, it used to be where to put rainwater harvesting in, I would tell people it's a little more than your first well, but it's a whole lot less than your second well. Because out here, nearly everybody ends up with two wells because sooner or later they'll go dry.
Right. Wow.
But
That's
now it's
crazy.
gotten to where rainwater harvesting is about the same cost as a well,
Oh,
and
wow.
the water is so much better.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's so
Oh
much
yeah.
better.
Always. Well, and I just want to say thank you for being up on these issues. This is what we expect
Certainly.
of somebody who's going to be a
Yes.
representative, is to know the little minutia of this stuff, right? You know,
Right.
it's
Thank you.
beautiful. I want to bring it to another question, then we'll see if Laura Livengood has anything on this topic. But I want to talk about immigration because that is kind of a huge issue in Texas. Maybe not for your particular
Uh-huh.
area, but let's talk about. You've got says we need a program that permits workers to come here legally and easily and be free to go back home for visits. Our broken system now actually encourages people to stay here because it's so dangerous to try to go home and come back. This is true, and the paying of the coyotes. I actually know an individual personal experience with that. So, what do you think is the solution in Texas? But maybe more so, what do your constituents think? Because the overall impression that I have as a person not in Texas is that Texas is very anti-immigrant, but they love their labor.
That's pretty much it, I think. Austin is a little different. There was a middle school here in Austin last week where a teacher had said something to a child who started speaking Spanish, and the teacher said something like, "Go back to Mexico if you want to speak Spanish."
Nice.
Well, then, yeah, wasn't that great? And then nothing was done to this teacher. And a day, I guess the next day, the kids got up and walked out. Were walking the halls saying, "Immigrants are welcome here,"
Oh, well, that's
and
awesome.
chanting. It was just like so touching that they did that.
Oh,
That is awesome.
So Austin is a very welcoming community. I find that Dripping Springs, the community that we're in, is also very welcoming. We had a case where some undocumented immigrants were killed in a car wreck, and by like 5 o'clock that night, there was a GoFundMe fund up to raise enough money to send them home so they could be buried back in Mexico with their
Oh, wow.
families. So there are people with very big hearts. Again, some of the more rural counties depend on immigrant labor. I was in Hamilton fairly recently, and they were telling me that the farmers were having real problems getting their sheep sheared and their crops in because the people were afraid to come out to work. And they're like, there's nobody here that can do this work. And they're really struggling. I was like, well, then they need to be voting for Democrats who are
Right.
going to work to have good immigration reform so that we can get people here and they can work and they can be fairly paid, and we can make it right for everybody.
What an interesting idea, right? Just
Yeah.
equality. The story you just told, I'm hearing from all the states. Hey, we have farmers that have crops that have rotted
Mhm.
because there's nobody to do this work. And,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
tried to find a bunch of suburban white folk to do it, and they were like, not for $3 an hour.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I don't want you to think that Texas is all, rainbows and unicorns. It's
No.
it's not. We have that terrible Show Me Your Papers bill that passed
Right,
this
right.
year. My daughter, as you may have read, is from Guatemala. And
No,
we've
I
had
did
to have
not read
that.
that. I should have.
Okay, okay. We adopted her from Guatemala as a
That's
baby.
awesome.
She's wonderful.
Yeah.
And we had to have a conversation with her about what she would do if she was pulled over. She's 16. She's starting to drive.
Wow.
And, a current concern if she gets pulled over and asked where you're born, because if she's in Guatemala, what's going to happen to her?
Right.
So she's to say, I'm an American citizen. I was adopted as a baby. I was born in Guatemala. I'm an American citizen. I said, you start and you end with that, because that's what they need to hear first and foremost. And then I made her a copy of her certificate of citizenship to carry with her. And it breaks my heart that she has to do that. And after we had that talk, she looked at me and she said, why do they hate us?
That's a great question.
How do
That's
you tell your
horrific that
kid?
you have to tell
What
your
do you say
kid
to your
that.
kid?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's That's wrong.
It's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And that they would pass bills. And when they were passing that bill, there were police from all over the state saying this is not going to keep us safer. It's going to make us less safe because it's going to make these people be victims of crime. They're going to be afraid to tell anyone.
Yep.
You know, it's just pure racism, xenophobia, and trying to make our troubles, trying to make them be on the backs of someone else.
Yeah.
Take care of your own troubles, people.
Yeah, it just reminds me again of that hypocrisy of what I would expect out of good people, and you sit back and you go, these, they talk like good people. The politicians talk like they're good people, and then they don't walk the talk. That's what we need, some more walking of the talk here.
Yeah.
That's horrific. I would be so
It
frightened.
is.
I would be so frightened for my child that I would want to walk with them everywhere and be armed. That's how I would feel.
I won't go that far.
No, but I mean, it's
But,
just.
but
Yeah.
the police around here know her. They know us. So I'm not really worried around here. But she'll go into Austin. She might be somewhere else.
Right. Right.
I am concerned, and she's concerned, and she's scared and a little angry, and
Absolutely.
doesn't understand why people don't like her just because of the color of her skin.
And it's
I
horrific.
don't really either.
Yeah, I don't get it. We're gonna Laura Levin. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I got one that's a perfect segue as long as we're talking about
Great.
human rights.
Great.
What about in your district and issues with LGBT rights and legislation and things going on?
Well, again, Texas is not exactly a leading light on that. We had the lieutenant governor is just obsessed with who goes to the bathroom where. And I just keep saying, keep your nose out of other people's underpants. Just leave it alone, buddy.
Right.
That's really good advice.
We had a case out here in Dripping with third grade transgender student who the kids had seen her since kindergarten transitioning, and this year she asked, may I use the girls' bathroom? And the principal, did a consultation and said, absolutely. It's a personal accommodation, no problem. Well, a group that's called Texas Values, except I could call them Texas No Values, got involved in it, and the word got out there. We're going to be at the a school board meeting on Monday. Well, one of our friends started a petition saying that we supported the school, we supported the student. By the next day, there were, 400 or 500 people. By Sunday, 700 and something people had signed it. Monday night at the school board, we showed up, and there were the school board room and 2 overflow rooms.
Wow.
And it was mostly people supporting this child.
Wow.
And we went back time after time, and this was, I guess that was in August or September and October, November. I think at the December meeting, they said, would everyone who supports this child please stand? And almost the whole room stood.
Wow.
And one of the school board members said, that gave me chill bumps.
Nice.
And after that, Texas Values never showed up again. Chuck Smith, the executive director of Equality Texas, said we were his only bright moment of that fall. So, but as far as LGBTQ rights, I am a strong supporter. As you notice, I grew up in the floral design world. I had friends who were gay long before I even knew what gay was. It's they're people just like us. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who you love. To consenting adults. One of the best things that I was ever able to participate in, the weekend after marriage equality became the law of the land, I am ordained. So I went down to the courthouse, and we were doing marriages for people. And I performed 3 marriages that day. I think the least time anybody had been together was 7 years. The most was 20 years. And one of the couples said, we want to get our family together. Can we come back this afternoon? I was like, oh, absolutely. Came back. It was their parents, their grandparents, their nieces, their nephews. We were like 20 or 30 people.
Wow.
And it was just the most joyous wedding. It was fabulous. So nice. I am a strong supporter.
All right, well, let's keep on that. I want to touch, because you brought up religion and evangelical a couple times, ordained, and I've mentioned the kind of the hypocrisy that we see going on there. So, in your view, how do you handle choice with a woman's rights just to her body as a woman? And I say this just because I want to lay this down, that I am shocked to see that we have a woman defending Roy Moore in Alabama, just choosing party line over, I don't know what to call it. So how do you breach that in your, that's a really tough boundary you got to go there with religion and just in general.
Okay, I'll be clear. My ordination is internet ordination. It's not through a
Oh,
denomination.
okay.
So just
Cool.
want to be clear on that.
No, that's cool. That's
And I did that just because as a wedding coordinator, sometimes we're doing weddings out in the middle of nowhere and there's supposed to be a JP coming and
of course.
they've been late a few times and I got a little nervous.
All right, that makes
I'll get
sense.
ordained and that way if they don't show, we can still have a wedding.
Well, that you did say you were a
So you
person
did
of
it.
faith, so I will go there. But that's
I am
cool.
a person of faith. I am a
Okay.
person of faith.
Okay,
Yeah.
well that's cool though, the internet thing.
Yeah.
All right.
I believe very strongly in a woman's right to choice. The decisions that have to be made sometimes, I think, can be very painful. And someone who's not in that position really has no place making the decision for them.
Right.
When I read my Bible, I don't see anything about abortion. I don't see anything about LGBTQ people either. I mean, there's a couple of scriptures, but whenever you start going back to the foundation, they were really more about promiscuity, and they were more about the lack of hospitality than they were about same gender sex. So whenever people talk about choice, I'm like, you have the choice to, you can adopt, you can decide not to have children, you can have 12 children. Choice means that it is trusting the woman to make the decisions that are going to be the best decisions for her.
That's
Um,
well said.
I just feel very strongly about that.
You getting any pushback on that in your district?
No. Well, I shouldn't say no. I got several postcards last time from people saying, please change your position. And I was
Oh.
like, no. And I will tell you, if you don't mind me sharing a personal story,
Please.
when we were first trying to start a family, we went through infertility treatments and did in vitro and did it twice actually, and had a nice little fertilized zygote that was placed in my uterus, and neither time did I get pregnant, by the way. So whenever people say that the morning after pill is an abortion, no, it's not, because if the fertilized egg doesn't implant, you're not pregnant. But we had a long talk before that about what we would do if we did get pregnant and if we found that there was some problems with our child. I have a sister who's mentally disabled who lives with us. Now hers actually became because as she was being born, the placenta separated early and she was brain damaged and died technically 7 times and was brought back. So her brain was damaged. And we knew that our child would not have anyone to take care of this child. Mary Lynn has me. So we had discussed that if there was going to be a problem, because I was older when we were doing this, you have a higher rate of things that can happen.
Right.
And we had discussed that we would likely abort if there was a problem. And the reason for that was not because we were concerned about having a child that would not be perfect, but because my husband had a cousin who was also mentally disabled, and I mean severely mentally disabled. She was never out of diapers her whole life. Her mother cared for her for many years until she wasn't able to care for her anymore, and they had to put her in a nursing room. And one evening, and Emily got a call real late in the night saying that her daughter had fallen out of bed and torn her rectum.
Oh man.
The likelihood of that happening was slim to nothing
Right.
because she was in diapers, and the more likelihood is that someone sodomized her.
Wow.
And I could not bring a child into the world knowing that it could face that type of future,
Right.
because there wouldn't be anyone to care for him or her.
Wow.
So that's where our decision came from, that we would have had an abortion.
That's wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's
I haven't shared that many times, but I think it's important that people understand how very personal these stories are.
I have no right making a
all
decision
the
for
things
that
that
for
go
you,
into it.
right? I mean, no one has a right to make that. That's just
Yeah.
listening to it right there. I'm saying I don't even have a right to know that information to have to make that
Yeah.
decision. And so these men in office right now that are making not
Hmm.
only your decisions, women's decisions all across the board, because there were no women involved in the healthcare plan,
Right.
right?
Yeah. That was rather interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
just so sorry. I just,
yeah.
on behalf of men, I apologize
Well,
that you're subjected to that, and what tough choices you and your husband had to make. That wow,
yeah. But we adopted and we have the perfect daughter for us. So
right.
we are blessed with that.
And now we just have to keep her safe.
Absolutely. And it's one of the main reasons I'm running.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That
Sure.
is just huge. Laura, live and good. Do we have any questions from the audience?
No, no more questions. We're about 9 minutes.
I know. I see that. We're gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to bring up one. You're on your issues. I was looking at the issues. You're running a very progressive platform. All right.
Yes.
You're going to be running against a Republican. We know where he stands on things. But there's this other guy that I see in here, and I'm just curious where his name is Chris Perry. We looked at his website. He's running from what looks like a Bernie-crat perspective. Where do you think about Chris? And is he a challenger that you have to be worried about here?
I think I have to be concerned about everyone, but I think all of us are running against Roger, and that's the main thing that we have to look at. We've got to make sure that Roger doesn't go back.
Right.
That's
Yes.
my biggest concern.
I agree with you there. You need anything to get rid of Roger. But what would you say separates the difference between you and where Chris stand in their issues? Is there anything that stands out?
I think our issues are probably very much the same. I think the difference is the experience. I've got such a tremendous amount of experience, between the political experience I've got and then the business experience I've got. I've been a teacher. I've worked in a family business. I worked for a small corporation. I've had my own business for 27 years. Been active in the community. I actually live in the district, which I think is important. You don't have to live. Odd, isn't it? You don't actually have to live in the district. Roger doesn't live in the district. But I think it's
Interesting.
important because if you live in the district, it's your community. You know the people. They're your neighbors. They're your friends. And I just really believe it's an important issue. Plus, if we're running against Roger, to be able to say, I live in the district and he doesn't.
Right.
If you don't live in the district, then you lose that little talking point. And it's always interesting how many times whenever I bring that up, people are horrified that he doesn't live in the district.
Right.
And I'll say, well, you don't actually have to, but he should. Well, I agree, he should.
He should, and it's big enough. You've got all sorts of places to choose from. All
Yeah,
up and
and often we'll see Roger Williams or Austin. I'm like, he doesn't live here. He has an apartment here. He does not live here. He lives in Weatherford.
Oh, okay. That's a joke. I wanted to. You had mentioned this at the beginning, and I'm going to say it so that you don't get in trouble for it. But I thought this was interesting. What's going on here? So, nobody knows that Roger Williams doesn't even live in your district. He doesn't really represent your district all that well. And you guys look to the previous right? Who you mentioned went off to another district or something, right?
Yep.
So,
I mean, we're working poor Lloyd half to death. We need to get me elected so that I can take that burden off of him and take care of 25.
there you go. So Lloyd, who was the previous rep before Roger was halfway decent, is off somewhere else. And this young man, Chris, who's running, is actually from a different district that he was running in before, correct?
Correct.
Interesting. And we don't know why he shifted to this district.
Well, he said that we needed a real progressive in this district, and I was like, "Oh, really? Am I chopped liver or what?"
All right, my response
yeah.
to that, yeah. You not only do you need a real progressive, which I think we have right here with Kathi Thomas, but we need somebody with experience, and I think you've got that in
Thank you.
buckets. That's just amazing. You have been phenomenal.
Well, and I think we need a woman too. I think we
Agreed.
need more women in office. All things being equal, vote for the woman.
Absolutely, especially in Texas. And why don't you take
Absolutely.
a few moments, tell everybody about this group of women in Texas that you're dealing with, and then get into a stump speech why we should vote for you. All right?
Okay. So there's a group of 19 women in Texas who are running from the state and congressional offices, and we're in a group called the Texas Women on Fire. And we've
Nice.
got a campaign through Act Blue called Elect Her. If you do hashtag Elect Her, you can make a donation to the Act Blue page, and it will split amongst all of us. I mean, there's been a lot of people making $25 donations apparently because we're getting a lot of $1.19 donations, and it's great. It
Nice.
is just great. It's a wonderful group of women, and we encourage each other when somebody's down. Everybody encourages them. We help each other with resources. Here's where to find this. Here's where to find that. And it's just been so wonderful working with this group of women. And y'all are talking about maybe having us on for
Yes.
a stream, which would be great to have them on. It's such a great opportunity to elect a bunch of good women in Texas, especially.
Agreed. I want more than 50% in my government, at least.
Absolutely. That'd be
Absolutely.
great.
So tell everybody,
Yeah.
take a few minutes, why vote for Kathi Thomas for District 25?
I would like for people to vote for me because they want someone who is like them. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a fund manager or anything like that. I'm just a regular. I'm a mom. I'm active in PTA. I'm active in the Band Boosters, in my church, in my community. I have a small business. I'm really like the majority of the people in the district. I've worked for so long for progressive issues. I tell people I've worked for decades for progressive issues, and with a 16-year-old daughter, I'm not about to stop now.
Yes.
I decided to make this run primarily because of my daughter, because of what's going on, and I see that people are trying to push us backwards. When I got my first car, I had to have my daddy co-sign the loan with me, even though I was a college graduate and had a job. I don't want us to go backwards. We need to push forward. We need to make it better for our children so that they have a better life, so that they can get out of college not owing tons of debt, so that they've got health care that is affordable, accessible, and hopefully universal, which would make it even better.
Yes.
There are so many things that we need to do. Now, I've got to be real straight with you. As long as we have this president or his vice president as the president, we're probably not going to pass any, or we're not going to get any signed into law progressive legislation. We get a majority in the House, we can pass stuff, and we can show people this is the kind of governance we want to do. But we're not going to get anything passed into law. But what we can do during that time period is to start to build bridges with people. And this is what I've done as an event coordinator, is you find a group of people that say, well, we kind of like this idea. And then you drill down to the little germ of what you want to do. And then you can start building. If it's, we think everybody should be able to have good health. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to accomplish this. And then we build from there. And so we can start building bridges now. And I think because of my experience, I'm going to be a better bridge builder than the other candidates. And I would really like your vote. If you're in Congressional District 25, we start early voting February the 20th through March the 2nd, and the election is on March 6th. I want to beat Roger Williams, but to do that, I've got to win the primary. I would really appreciate your help.
Awesome. Thank
And
you.
it's KathyForCongress.com. You got that up there. Thank you.
There you go. I was going to say, tell everybody where to go. Kathi for Congress. That's beautiful. Awesome. Thank you so much for running, Kathi, and doing everything you've done for the progressive movement.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this program. I watched several of them, and they're just,
Oh.
the interviews are so uplifting. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We work hard at this. All the volunteers do. Laura Livengood, thank you for doing what you do, being here.
You're welcome. I was saying in
Laura.
chat that We the People keeps me sane, because
Doesn't
we get reminded twice a week about all the good people who are running and stepping into running from all over the place, and that is that's a marvelous thing to see. And speaking of that, next week we have Pete D'Alessandro from Iowa.
Oh, yeah, Pete D'Alessandro. Everybody, I forgot about that. He's, what is that? What day is that, the actual date?
That's Monday.
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 Okay, so it's after the 26th. So remember, we have the
Yes.
26th with Nina Turner coming up.
Right,
Okay, and that's
right.
huge, and that's what I'm worried about. And then I'll worry about Pete. But
Yeah.
Pete was one of the guys, you guys remember, Pete's running for, I don't know what he's running for in Iowa, but he was at the Scott's funeral, and
He's
Scott
one of
knew him.
Scott's. He's someone that Scott really trusted and liked. So that was
Yes.
great. And then on Wednesday we've got the return of Tim Canova.
Yeah. Oh, hey.
Who has been on We the People before, and he's going to come talk to us about what's going on in Florida.
Actually, it's
Great.
good stuff going on in Florida if you haven't seen, because
Yeah.
they are passing progressive measures through their Democratic Party or under their platform. So they're actually making some movement there. It's good stuff.
And I just got to say, one thing that really gives me hope for Texas
Yes.
is Oklahoma just elected a lesbian woman who, in a district that Trump won by 40 points. If
Wow.
Oklahoma can do it, we've got hope to elect progressives in Texas. So, yay, Oklahoma. And that's probably the only time you'll ever hear me say, yay, Oklahoma.
That is true.
Welcome
Being a
aboard.
Texan, being a Texan. I'm just going to say, you talk about unity. That's unity right there. You're willing to say that. Tell us about the
Absolutely.
song you picked to go out. Why'd you pick this song? We couldn't run your first one, but this is Land Is Your Land. But who's the artist?
I love this song. I've listened to this song since I was practically in diapers. My older sister, was a big Pete Seeger fan,
Nice.
so heard it on the original versions there. It just speaks to what this country is. It's not for the rich. It's not for anybody on their own. It's for everybody, every color, every social strata. And we need to go back to understanding that we are better when we work together, that when we help each other. And if we can do that, we can really start to realize the promise of our founding documents. I tell my daughter that our country isn't perfect. It's very far from perfect, but our founding documents hold a great deal of promise. And that's what I would like to see us move towards, is to go for the common welfare and the pursuit of happiness and working together. So that's why I love this song.
That's beautiful. I love that. The founding documents, not fathers, just documents. I like
Documents.
that.
I like that.
This land
Well
is
done.
your land. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you.
See everybody on the 26th.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California, well, to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. I tell you, this land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of a highway, I saw above me all that endless skyway. Now I saw below me that golden valley, and I said, this land was made for you and me. As I was walking, now they tried to stop me. They put up a sign that said, oh, it said private property. Well, on the backside, you know, it said nothing. So it must be that side was made for you